another episode of Don't Waste the Chaos. I'm your host, Kerri Roberts. I always get excited to bring back familiar voices, especially ones that appeal to a ton of you, which this one always does. And I'm especially thrilled today that our guest has joined us before to unpack fabulous topics like anxiety and stress. And as much as we don't want to talk about that, it's a part of daily life. And you all have loved these episodes. So I'm bringing her back and we're going to jump into another topic today I know you're going to want to hear about. And this time we're going to focus on talking about it in a very clear and practical way. We're going to dive in even deeper. So Karen Brooks has an MSW. She's a speaker. She's a mentor who has spent years helping individuals and families navigate the complexities of emotional and mental health. She has a unique ability to take big, overwhelming topics and make them both relatable and actionable, which is my favorite part. Her wisdom doesn't just come from her professional training, but also from the tons of real stories and experiences that she's walked through alongside clients. Whether it's working with teens or adults or parents, Karen consistently helps people discover hope, healing, and healthier rhythms in the midst of chaos. Today, we're tackling something that quietly drives so much of our stress and our overstimulation, and that is dopamine addiction. From technology to productivity to relationships, is affecting every part of our lives. And Karen is the perfect person to help us not just understand it, but also move toward balance and freedom, if that's possible in 2025. So Karen, I'm so glad to have you back on the show. Let's jump in.
Let's do it.
Okay, so you've helped us unpack anxiety and stress in the past, and today we're diving into something that's often underlying to both. So can you help us understand what this actually looks like in everyday life?
Yeah, so, every time we start, I back my way out of our conversation and start with a definition. So let's start there because, quite frankly, you really can't get addicted to dopamine. You can get addicted to something, but our bodies produce dopamine, so you don't get addicted to your own chemical being released. So that's kind of a little complex, but it's a pet peeve of mine when people say that they're addicted to dopamine. They're not addicted to dopamine. They like what dopamine does. They're addicted to something that follows the dopamine rush or in anticipation of something that's going to release dopamine. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, it does. It cracks me up because every time I have an episode with you, this is how it starts. It's like, let's kind of almost debunk it to start out with so we can start with a clear playing field instead of what social media or whomever puts out there. So I love that. So what does this look like in everyday life then?
Well, they're related. Dopamine and addiction are related, kind of like I just broke down a little bit. But what's actually happening is, and the reason we're talking about it so much is because we have so much overstimulation around us in our day-to-day lives now. And so the focus has been more on the dopamine because we know that's the feel-good hormone, which is funny because when we talk about addiction in general, we don't talk about the dopamine. We talk about being addicted to a substance or an activity, whether it be gambling, eating, drinking, drugs. But we don't talk about the dopamine that goes with it. But right now, fast forward and today, we are talking about it. Primarily probably because of the technology side. And so we're just trying to make cause and effect, I guess, if you will. And there's we're seeing change in behaviors. We're linking them back to certain things, but then we have to break it apart. So we're in the break it apart stage right now. I would say as professionals in the mental health field is we have a high level of understanding, but we're in the midst, in the thick of it also. So right now it's being broken down.
Okay. So from the work that you do, what are the subtle behaviors, whether it's in teens that you work with or adults, that often go unnoticed, but are signs that we are hooked on our next dopamine hit?
So generic. It's like everything else that everybody says. I'm going to say it and you're going to go wah, wah, wah. But it is what it is. And they all look the same because they're all closely related. So you're going to see maybe a decrease in your sleep patterns. You're going to see more anxiety surface. You might see what looks like depression, could be beginning onset of depression. You could be seeing, as it relates to your youth, you could be seeing lack of concentration, difficulty staying on task, on focus. But more importantly, I'd say my biggest red flag is not being able to regulate emotions. And I feel like that's where I see the bulk of the behaviors is, and that's my go-to response is if a child or a teen or even an adult is not reacting appropriately, or they're overly emotional, or they lack any maybe emotional sensitivity. So that's my probably biggest red flag is as it relates to the emotion side.
Mm. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and I'm curious, you didn't mention this one. A part of it is I'm getting older. I feel like the days are going by faster. Time is flying by. But I also know I see my technology use, and I somehow magically in these so fast days where everything's flying by, I have 4 hours of screen time. And I know that, compared to some kids, that's low, from what I see on TikTok or whatever, but I'm not giving myself a pat on the back because I'm like, that's 4 hours. And when I lay down in bed at night and I'm like, ooh, every day keeps going by faster and faster. It's like, is it? Because I had 4 hours in today, or 5 hours some days, where I was a zombie on my phone. I don't even know what I was doing. Are you seeing that play into?
Yes, but at the same time, I caution people, we're not putting this back in the bag. This is here to stay. Technology is not going away. It's only going to increase. So we just have to adapt how we respond to it. And it's grown so quickly that we haven't developed skills to go along with the advancement of technology. So we've gotten a little sideways, I guess. So I look at you and say, you spent 4 hours on technology, but I mean, everything in the world today is kind of done that way. So is there a place you could shave it off necessarily? Is there a place you want to shave it off? Maybe you don't need to. Maybe it's not causing a problem. And it is a source of contentment for a lot of people, whether you're maybe gaming, whether you're interacting with family or friends or coworkers. There's a lot of different avenues of social media that I want to pull back out of the bucket because I want to say, actually, that is a positive connection. You can't put that over here in this negative connection box just because you're putting a timestamp on it. They don't go together.
I'm going to take that as not enabling. But I do see your point. Like there are plenty of times where I am connecting with people that I wouldn't normally because of the ease of texting or whatever that is. So,
well, I'm just fast forwarding and we're just going to jump ahead. When I'm not enabling the use, I'm backing out and trying to educate people to understand your usage, because it's the anticipation of something that is the problem. And if you dive in, so if you're anticipating the excitement of scrolling through social media, that's probably not a good use of time. And that's causing probably some harm there along the way. So I'd rather people understand what they're using, how they're using it, whether it benefits them or whether it actually hinders them. You should be able to really break it down, not just say, well, I was on my screen for 4 or 5 hours today. Well, but what were you doing?
Yeah.
And how did it make you feel when you were done with it? Because if you left energized and feeling good, it's not negative. It's not any different today as going to a coffee shop with a friend and sitting there. Now, granted, I still feel like physical connection is a big deal, but we've got ways now to do this without having to be like right now. We're not in the same city. This is a connection. Yeah. So I guess I'm enabling a little bit.
Just shedding a little light.
Yeah.
And a little intentionality on it. No, I like that. We talk a lot about overstimulation these days. How does that tie to dopamine cycles, and how are you seeing it impact relationships within families? And I think that's two probably very separate things to talk about there.
So the overstimulation is where we start hearing about dopamine addiction, because that's exactly what addiction is. Addiction is the overstimulation of and being overwhelmed by a sensation. So you are seeking it out. So for instance, alcohol, you become addicted because you become overwhelmed by the feelings that you're having with it. So you want it again. It's overwhelmed, not in a bad way. It's overwhelmed in a good way. That's overstimulation. So when we become overstimulated, we start to seek it out more and more and more. That's the beginning of addiction, is when you start to seek out those releases of dopamine. So back to how kind of dopamine works, our primitive selves rely on dopamine to function. So take it back to our early years, the dopamine releases that we have when we come in contact with something that we like or enjoy tells us to do it again. For instance, eating. If we didn't enjoy eating or the taste of food, there would have been no connection that tells us to do it again. But we have to do it again to survive. So that's the roots of why dopamine exists in our bodies. And it is to help reinforce things that we need that are positive so that we don't over rotate into the release where it also can be responsible for your flight or fight or fawn or whatever you care to call it in that moment. But your dopamine is responsible for all of that. So it regulates your feelings per se. So you have to have dopamine. And that's why I say you can't become addicted to dopamine because you need it. But what you can become addicted to is wanting quick hits of it. You want a fast hit of dopamine. So when you anticipate that you're going to me, the easiest way to understand it is kind of almost like is gambling in that aspect, because a gambler anticipates the feeling of sitting at the table, anticipates the look of the cards or the chips. Something is telling them, their brain, to release that surge of dopamine. That's the beginning. It's not actually, at that point, you haven't actually engaged in the behavior. You're seeking it. So that's the beginning of an addiction right there, is your anticipation and craving it.
That's interesting, because when you first started talking about gambling, my brain was like, oh yeah, she's going to say we're anticipating the win.
Mm-mm.
But that's not what you said.
You're anticipating
the
process.
Huh.
You're anticipating the act because you have been predispositioned at one point that it feels good, probably a win, something, and the lights and the sounds. That's why casinos are designed the way they are. The minute you walk in, the anticipation spikes. You just, especially if you like to gamble, your heart probably starts racing. You might start salivating. I know that sounds weird, but like your body starts to actually have physical responses because it's remembering a time that felt good. And it's recognizing the lights and the sounds, and it's seeking, it's basically running towards that feeling.
That is a very abstract example for me, because casinos cause me, I'm overstimulated in a negative way. Like the ding, 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 and the lights and all of that stuff. My brain's like, I gotta walk through this to get to my room at the Cosmo or whatever. That is stressful for me. So that's an interesting example to hear you walk through, because that doesn't happen to everybody, but that's why some people are addicted to gambling and some people aren't.
Well, that's a very specific example that I gave though, but it's a generic example, because your brain is associating those lights and all that sounds and whistles and whatnot with something else that was not positive, that you didn't like. So somewhere that is causing you to shut down, whereas maybe causing the next person to ramp up.
Yeah.
But I'm going to gather that you're not addicted to gambling.
I'm not.
So, I mean,
no.
There's that. If you were, all that stuff would probably really excite you.
Yeah, that's not my problem. Not that I don't have other problems, but I am not addicted to that. So how are you seeing this impact relationships inside of families with the teens that you're working with?
Gosh. Okay. So as it goes back to we're just going to talk about technology and because that's what really we're dealing with the most right now. And as far as it goes for teens, their brains aren't fully formulated. They're not complete yet. So them engaging in technology and these quick dopamine hits, which is basically what social media is, the likes and the things that get you excited, draw you in to keep you coming back, are the same things that can also hinder your growth, especially in teens, because your brains aren't fully developed. So by being exposed early on to so much stuff that's stimulating your brain and not understanding how to back your way out of it, you become, we're going to rewind back to when I told you some of the things that you see are irritability, anxiety, depression, but more importantly, as a society, we're not learning to problem solve as well. We're not as content overall. We want instant gratification for the most part. So those things in general play a big impact as a parent or within a family, because you're dealing with people that's their brains are developing in almost a negative way because their environment is kind of telling them that. For instance, doom scrolling. I don't know if you've heard much about doom scrolling, but that's basically what our kids do for the most part, is doom scroll. Now, technically, doom scrolling is related to searching out negative events. Maybe if you're right wing or left wing, you're searching out a real strong opinion. That's typically doom scrolling is just that, scrolling for doom. You are being hit on negative emotions, negative ideas, a lot of complaints, a lot of judgment, a lot of that stuff. And that in general makes people less content. They become more focused on what doesn't work than what works. So back to our primitive selves, when we didn't have technology, we were forced to be still and sit with our emotions and our thoughts. If something felt bad, we didn't just pick up our phone, start scrolling, which is what our kids are trained to do now. When they don't feel bad, they know to feel better by picking up their phone and opening up an app that might make them feel better because it has likes or something that their brain associates with a positive reinforcement. So it's complicated, but that's where I go, is back to doom scrolling, and that it has such a negative impact overall on our mental health. And we go down that rabbit hole so quickly without even knowing. So if you start doom scrolling at a young age, you're actually rewiring your brain in a negative way. Which means your adult self is going to have to do some serious work to back out of that if you want to be content in life.
That's scary, because I just don't think that much thought is going into it, or we wouldn't allow this to happen, or we would try to regulate it.
Yeah, not yet. Think of how new technology is. I would say it's coming, but by the time we get to it, the advancement of technology is growing so rapidly. By the time we catch up, it'll be even further along. So, it's really not that complicated. If you ask a mental health professional, it's all about being mindful and being able to recognize behaviors before they happen and to understand complex emotions and how to communicate them. You can do that stuff. Who cares about the technology?
That's so true. And actually, it's making me think of, we were talking before we started the episode of some of the, quote unquote, bad things that we finally recognized were negative. And so people were like, better not do that. And now they're circling back. Like we talked about nicotine, we talked about tanning beds, and those are both really gaining in popularity. But 10 years ago, we were like shaming people for utilizing nicotine. Everybody had to get rid of their tanning beds. Like you quit showing your Playboy bunny or your lightning bolt or whatever it is that you were using for your tanning mechanism. And so I'm just curious to watch this pendulum swing over time. Like as we learn, then I think right now people are starting to say like, oh, it's bad and you need to wait and this is negatively impacting. And then what will happen later? We'll maybe learn how to balance it
I
or
mean,
regulate it in some way.
wouldn't that be
Hopefully.
great? That's probably
I
a
hope
pipe
so.
dream. That's probably what we've always been searching for. But I mean, a lot of professionals right now think that exactly what we were discussing is because our youth, our next generation, is tired of being told, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. As a result, we've put them in a box and we put a bubble around them. And now they're like, I mean, that wasn't exactly the best path forward either. And I think so. Some people think that they're just coming full circle saying, well, we'll try it on our own. And then when it's a bad idea, we'll let you know.
Yeah. So you just a little bit ago mentioned the importance of emotional regulation, slowing down. How can we begin to recognize when dopamine seeking behaviors are actually hijacking our ability to rest or to feel that contentment?
If you can take a pause at some point during your day when you feel that maybe your tension is higher or maybe you feel a little unsettled or restless, if you think about what your next move is and what you gravitate towards next, that'll, in a sense, guide you on what you need to work on. So for me, when I get overwhelmed or anxious, I definitely reach for my phone. First things first. And I have like, at this point, I've studied myself for a while. So at this point, I have like a process where I open this app and I do a set of things. And then I close it and I open, actually, I don't close them, but then I open another app and I do a set of things. And then I open another app. And that's probably where I land, which is typically at that point, some sort of game is where, after that is where I land. And so just by recognizing that when I'm anxious to reach for my phone, if I were to say, I'm reaching for my phone, that's enough to tell me, don't do that. Do something else. Go outside, get some fresh air, take a deep breath, self-regulate in a way that is healthy rather than in a way that might further a feeling. So if I'm already anxious and upset and I pull up, let's just say Facebook, for instance, because I like to follow news on the Facebook app. It's just easier that way for me. I don't know why, but I do. But if my news feed is all negativity, and it is a lot about bombings or school shootings or a plethora of other things, that isn't helping me to relax. That's actually just creating more anxiety because my body is now scanning for danger. So now I'm in my fight or flight response and my body is stuck scanning for danger. So I'm not actually alleviating a stress. I've just added more onto it, but I did get away from the original stress that I was trying to run from. If that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I've noticed in this past week, my resting heart rate is not getting as low as I want it to overnight. And so my restfulness score on my Aura ring is not good. And I was like, okay, I didn't have to think very long to think, what is off about me? I'm not sick. I haven't been, alcohol will do that to me, but I haven't been drinking. I had one glass of wine in 2 weeks, like I'm sleeping like 7 to 8 hours, my usual. I'm working. Work hasn't been overly stressful. It didn't take me very long to realize like there was a major death that happened very publicly. I watched the shooting happen. And the week before that, I watched a stabbing happen. And those are things that I don't watch. My stomach gets turned when my husband and my son watch UFC. I like can't stand to watch somebody get punched in the head. Like I get grossed out by that, but yet I've watched 2 murders in the past 2 weeks. And there is a direct correlation in my health data that says my resting heart rate is not getting down very low at night. But as far as like the way I'm moving through my day, it's the same.
But
I'm moving through my day the same.
That goes back to your primitive self. Your body is doing exactly what it is designed to do. There was a threat and your body responded towards the threat, but the threat isn't immediate to you, but your body doesn't know that. Your body doesn't know that it's not an immediate threat. It's anticipating the threat to come in. And when you fill your brain with that, it's already a threat.
Yeah, it's just reminding me I've got to stay off of social media for a few days and try to regulate again.
Yeah.
So, what are some practical tools or rhythms that can break the cycle, especially for families or teens trying to have healthier habits together as a family unit, above and beyond just restricting screen time?
Yeah. Restricting screen time to me is it's a great idea, but I don't even know how, again, going back to how we started our conversation, they need it for school. They need it for their homework. At this point, like, how do you get away from a screen? Everything is on a screen. So, I mean, in theory, that'd be really great, but that's just not how our world works anymore. So going back to that, you hear a lot about a like a technology, what is it? Not a break, what's the word I'm thinking about?
Detox?
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically a fast. So a technology fast. That doesn't actually reset your brain. Lots of people think like, oh, that's what you need to do. It doesn't really work that way. Our brains are not designed like that. A fast can do great things in the sense that it forces you to become more mindful, forces you out of a routine that maybe you got stuck in, like earlier when I said I've got my go-to ways that I like process through if I'm paying attention. So a fast in that sense will break those habits initially, which is always good and brings you back down to being a little bit more aware of your surroundings. But the fast itself does not reset anything in your brain. That is not a thing. Lots of people talk about, oh, it's going to reset. No, you don't reset anything because the dopamine is already associated with something. So the minute that you bring technology back that provides that quick fix of dopamine, whatever it is, your fast it's done because your dopamine spikes again when you come back in contact with whatever it was that you were trying to fast from. Because that's just how it works. But our brains they're neuroplastic. I don't know if that means much to you, but it means that they're ever changing. They have the ability to actually shift. They have the ability to actually change connections. Whereas nothing else on us really has that ability unless it's forced to do that. Like break a bone, you go to see a surgeon, whatever. But our brains are neuroplastic, which gives us the ability to learn new things. If our brains were so formed, we wouldn't be able to learn a new language. We wouldn't be able to learn a new skill. Like all of that would just end when you were done growing and your brain was done developing. But our brains are the only organ in our body that does that. So by the same sense, you can, oh my God, I lost my track.
No, you're totally fine. We were talking about how, like, what different rhythms or practical tools that we can use for healthier habits to break this
Yes.
cycle. Mm-hmm.
So as far as, so a technology fast or detox is a great thing to do just to reset our mindful state. But if you don't want to just do that and you don't want to go for a day, 5 days, 7 days, a month, I mean, that's kind of extreme. But you can also do mindful things in general just to help recognize where you are using technology as a crutch, if you will, something that you're using to get through anxiety or you're just running to for out of boredom or whatever is happening in front of you. But when you go to bed, putting your phone not on your nightstand, maybe across the room, on a dresser, in the bathroom, somewhere where you can't physically reach it, will automatically retrain your brain because you can't follow through with a habit. So if your habit is putting your phone on your nightstand and somewhere along the line you wake up in the middle of the night and you think, I'm awake, and you reach for your phone automatically, well, you've just reinforced that behavior all over again. So to break that, move your phone, because that would require you to get up, walk across the room, and get your phone. You've now become mindful. Now you've associated an action with a behavior, and they correlate. Turning off notifications. I always recommend turning off notifications. That ding is also something tied closely to dopamine. That ding causes you to instantly want to look. As soon as you look, you want to open. Once you open, you start to read. You're back into your scrolling. So turn off your notifications so that it doesn't prompt you to grab and just get sucked in. Calling out what you're doing, if you're really struggling with not being able to cut some of it out, call out the behavior. I'm reaching for my phone right now. You've stopped the thought and you've kind of put a buffer, or I'm opening whatever app. Maybe if you're struggling with getting off a certain app, I'm opening the app right now. So you're breaking down the emotion and the feeling that goes with it. So that brings you into a mindful state.
I cannot imagine every time I reach for my phone, if I would say out loud, I'm reaching for my phone right now, I would be like, Kerri, stop. I mean,
would it be a bad
funny.
thing? It would probably really help you to realize how much you reach for your phone.
I agree. Yeah. I'm thinking if I started doing that today, that simple thing would probably shift my behaviors.
That's how it works. But you have to bring it to front of mind.
Can you apply that? Can you apply that for us with, I'd love to say alcohol, because that was so.
For my drink.
Yes. But one of the things I've been thinking about is we have now started shaming alcohol, okay, we've been drinking. We realize that it's toxic and it's poison. So that's happening. But I see so many people saying, oh, well, I'm not drinking alcohol, but I am smoking weed, eating edibles, doing mushrooms, or a number of other things for pleasure, dopamine, enjoyment, all of this. So can you help us think through this process of we pick the thing, we don't do the bad thing anymore that we've decided, but now we're doing these other things. Can you give us some ways to think through that so we can identify that it's the same pattern?
Gosh, I mean, it kind of just goes back. I feel like when you name a behavior, that's really, to me, the most accessible way to own a behavior. You're forced to identify it. You're forced to sit with it. You're forced to acknowledge it. You're forced to own it. So I guess I don't have a great answer, because we're always going to replace something with something else. It depends on the person, on how far they want that something to go before they want to replace it with something else. Or we talked about earlier, you and I, about rotating. Or do you get yourself into a rotation so that you're not overly relying on one certain activity, and you're, I don't know, maybe have more balance if that's what you want, if that's what you're looking for. I mean, now we're back to enabling, but if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah. No, and I think what I hear you saying also is my tendency is learn the information so I can, I don't know, shame myself into stopping. And really what I hear you saying is understand your why, understand your patterns, and then determine how you feel about that, what it's causing, and how to have some balance. But you're not saying identify it so you can cut that arm off and stop it, that's just not the point of really therapy.
No, it's really everything as it pertains to addiction all starts with anticipation. So you don't have, and addiction is kind of a naughty word. People don't like that. Nobody wants to be referred to as an addict, but no one wants to say, I'm addicted to this, that, or the other. But the reality is we all have addictions. Some we just decide are okay, and some we decide aren't. But all behaviors can be negative at some point if left unattended, or they get out of control, or they turn into a negative response. I mean, it's more important to recognize the anticipation, and the anticipation then helps you to identify what direction you're going. Are you going to jump all in and you're going to dive in and drink drink? Are you going to go gamble your hand away? Whatever it is, but it's the anticipation that prevents you or stops you from following through. So when the anticipation comes, like I said, the bells and the whistles and the sights and the sounds and colors, if that is the beginning of your anticipation, just knowing that when that happened and your increase in your heart rate happened and your anxiety started to rise and your body became more tense, that right there would tell you, that's not probably a good reaction. Maybe I should step back out and go somewhere else. Because that's the anticipation is getting ready for us to move into the next step, which is the action. So if you have a problem with it, if you can't call it out, you're going to go straight to the action. And then you binge, and then you do whatever, and then you have the guilt, and then you have the shame, and then what goes up must come down. So once you attacked yourself, whatever it was, and you had all your dopamine fix, you're going to crash, and you're going to have a dopamine crash, and then you're going to be tired and lethargic and anxious and maybe depressed and maybe feel guilt or shame. And then what are you going to do? You're going to start it all over again. And you're going to go over here and you're going to maybe reach for your phone and you're going to do the same cycle all over. But instead of over here with what we've said is bad, gambling, alcohol, we've now replaced over here with technology, something. So it's all about understanding why we're gravitating towards a behavior.
Yeah. In your experience, how does dopamine or seeking that dopamine fix affect identity formation, especially in teens, but even in adults who are constantly chasing, like for me, productivity, performance, validation?
Well, I mean, kind of like I said early on, the doom scrolling and technology usage with our younger generation, because their brains aren't fully formed, it does decrease their abilities to, like I said, problem solve, how to cope, and how to regulate their emotions. That stuff carries forward into your adult life. And if you started off with really unhealthy habits, or you started off not even having a clue that you could control those feelings and thoughts, you've just fast forwarded into chronic anxiety, chronic depression, chronic concentration issues. I mean, that's kind of how it just takes a hard right to that.
Yeah.
So they're all related. Not one is responsible necessarily for the other. Technology isn't the problem necessarily. Dopamine is not the problem necessarily. Anxiety is not the problem necessarily. They're all related. And it's just how you break them down.
Yeah. Well, you offer such grounded hope always. What would you say to the mom or to the dad or the employer that's listening today who feels like they've lost the battle either in their home or in their workplace when it comes to overstimulation or tech dependence? What hope would you offer them?
Well, I mean, we've already talked about how our brains are basically plastic and you can rewire them always. Unless you're dead, you can rewire your brain always, because the proof is in the pudding. If you can learn a new skill, your brain is still able to rewire and make new connections and do something differently. So there's always hope in that area. If you want it bad enough, you can make your brain, you can rewire it in a sense to do exactly what you want it to. But you got to want that. If you don't want that, well, then don't be surprised when you're stuck in this path that you are constantly never content. You're always wanting more. You're never just happy in a moment. And if you find yourself like that, that's when you need to go back to the mindfulness and figuring out how to move forward.
So if we say, yes, I do want to make the shift. I do want to change the way I'm approaching this. I want to change this behavior. How do we move from there? It's making me think of weight loss, for example. There's so many people who are like, I want to do this. And I guess the argument would be, do you actually want to? Because you're not taking action. But I think people do genuinely want to kick a bad habit or want to lose weight or want to be healthier or want to, stop lashing out their children or whatever it is. Like people want it. How do they move from the want to the change?
You got to move. You just said it. Like you can't just think, oh, that sounds great. I want to do that. You have to literally make that next move. And you have to do it again and again and again. And you have to make it a routine. And just doing it once isn't going to fix it. So back when you asked me about our kids and maybe how to help with that, my biggest recommendation to any parents or just in general to anybody wanting to make a change is back to naming the behavior. So if you see something, a behavior in your child, and you just name it and you call it out and say, well, it's possible that you're doing da 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 because of blah, blah, blah. Or have you considered the feeling that's associated with that? If you break it down, you now have an educational lesson. You've already started training your brain to think about something in a different way, to seek out a different answer, not to just be complacent and stuck with the answer that we have. So education is key, and our children want the knowledge. And if you start early enough and start calling out certain behaviors, they'll just automatically be doing it. They will maybe think twice about how much they scroll. They might be able to associate a negative behavior with scrolling or Snapchat or something. They might be able to back their way out of it before they get in too deep. This goes with adults too. It's just they're a little further along. They got a little bit more bad habits.
Yeah, they do.
So if you don't want the bad habit as an adult, break it as a kid.
If I could turn back
Exactly.
time. Well, before we wrap, anything else that you want to mention today on this topic?
I don't think so.
No, this was super helpful. These are things that people are talking about, people are thinking about. I think it's super relevant. How does someone get in contact with you if they want to?
Well, you can go to my website, which is guidedgrowthteencoaching.net, or you can look me up on LinkedIn. I've got all my stuff there, and you can contact me that way.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, folks, chaos is a part of life, but how we engage with it makes all the difference. Dopamine isn't the enemy, like Karen said. It's about how we understand it and can channel it in healthy ways for us. My hope is that today's conversation has given you practical insights and encouragement to step into a more intentional rhythm for yourself and for your family. I hope you don't waste this chaos and that you embrace it. Until next time.